So the World Bank says access to affordable and reliable electricity could transform Africa's economies, create millions of jobs, and lift people out of poverty. And in a blog post titled Switching on Opportunity, How Electricity Can Transform Jobs in Africa, the bank noted that about 600 million Africans still lack power, with unreliable supply reducing employment rates by up to 14 percentage points. To address this, the bank plans to invest $30 billion through its Mission 300 initiative to provide electricity to about 300 million Africans by the year 2030. Of course, we know that there have been other projects that have been on board, successful projects, I must say, as we've seen in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Senegal, and Sierra Leone, which already show how electrification boosts productivity and job creation. So to speak more on this, I'm joined by Abdulmajid Amusa, who is the CEO and founder of Dear Nigeria. Abdulmajid, thank you so much for coming around.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. It's a very, very important topic to me. I'm very passionate about it.
Okay, so for you, how critical is the access to affordable and reliable electricity in unlocking Africa's job creation potential and, of course, driving industrial growth?
Basically, this is the reason why I went to school, personally. So when I say that, I mean it completely. So the Dear Nigeria, the Marsh Engineering and Energy Resources Limited, was basically set up to unlock energy access for Nigerians. What we found as far back as 2016 was that obviously fuel subsidy was not sustainable. Eventually, it will be taken away. And when those realities hit, what would happen to the end consumer? There is a dire need for them to be sensitized on exactly how power is produced and how it gets to them, what options they have, and what are the ways they can use these options, to meet their needs, because there are different power sources for different needs, for different moments and seasons as well. So this understanding, we don't currently have it, and that's why we're all dependent on the grid. And the grid as it is, between 2015 and 2021, I was basically tracking the grid in real time, all the 29 power plants, and I could tell you for a fact, we're very, very far from having a stable grid that has a backup that can sustain us if anything goes wrong, and I mean, you and I know we're sharing just around 4.5 gigawatt of power for 230 million people, growing at 5% every year. This is an emergency. And I think the government sees this very clearly. We've been talking about it before now, but I think this particular government has actually done some of the most important things that are required to unlock, one, investment for decentralized energy technology, and two, to provide, the initial boost through the Rural Electrification Agency that, you can energize different things in the economy strategically without trying to carry everything at once. I think I'll just stop there as a background for now.
Okay, yeah, we understand that. But, just looking beyond Nigeria, even when you look at Africa, as I said earlier, you see that about 600 million Africans are still not having access to power. So when you talk about structural barriers, what would be your focus? What would you say are the things slowing the progress when it comes to electrification now of the African continent?
Yeah, something as simple as energy theft is a big issue. Before you even go to the structural aspect, you need to also look at the end consumers. To what extent do they understand, this technology called power and how, it works for them? For a long time, it was a social ideology behind power, but now it has become a business because this is what it has to be, because it requires investment from investors that require returns. So if they're going to put money into anything that would provide power to people, it's because they are sure that the people who are going to consume that power will pay for it in a way that they can keep running their business and make a profit to expand their investment and do more. So once you start by obviously creating a cost-reflective regime, that's the beginning. Then you now start to bring discipline. Then you now start to talk about using technology to curb theft. Then you now start to talk about monitoring and tracking. You now start to talk about, investment really is the crux of it. And then governance structures. really. Governance structures where investors are comfortable and consumers are prioritized. Affordability is a must. And, and this is the kind of structural, environment that we require. And like I said, decentralized solutions. Today is 2025. The way you would look at reaching your energy needs in year 2000, for example, is not exactly the same way you would look at it today, because there are more options today and there are ways you can meet different aspects of your operations without relying on one big structure. So while we're trying to get the grid right and the national or continental, grid and power pool right, we need to start regional approaches, state approaches, which you can see in Nigeria now. The states are now, taking charge of their local regulation to attract direct investment directly into their states, because that is the way. It's too bulky all the way from Abuja to look at the entire country, or all the way from an AU point of view. But once states, are thinking about it from a statewide point of view, it cascades into regional point of view, cascades into national points of view, and then the West African power pool, for example, that's also doing its own work to bring together power so that there's access for the entire region.
Okay.
And then things can now start to plug in once there is structure from the beginning, and there's cost reflective tariffs, so investors can see how their money would come out. The governance.
Okay, Abdulmajid, so you talk about the need for regional cooperation, to boost the power sector. And you also talked about attracting investment into the sector to accelerate the process. But then, there have been several projects that we've seen gone on for a couple of years. There is the Regional Transmission Grid Interconnection Project. There is the Renewable Mini Grids and Solar Off-Grid Project. There's the RESPICE, that is the Regional Emergency Solar Power Intervention Project in West Africa and Central Africa, Generation Projects. A whole lot of projects that have been on ground up until this point, but we've not seen appreciable growth. The World Bank is thinking of pumping another $30 billion into the same sector to power up Africa and to accelerate the process of electrification on the African continent. What is actually the issue with these projects, the funds being pulled, and the actualization of these projects, the realities of seeing that, okay, we have made available these sums of money, we have kickstarted this project, and we have been able to scale up access to power and reduce the deficits from 600 million, probably to about 400 million or 300 million. Why haven't we seen appreciable growth despite all these projects being on board?
Yeah. Again, I would always use Nigeria as my own, African case study, because it mirrors what's happening in other countries to an extent. So like I said some important things earlier. I told you about the cost reflective tariff. Now, unless you're actually making the investment that goes into power business realistic and profitable, it's hard for you to unlock capital that would give you the ability to provide those systems. There's a lot of progress going on, but a lot of things have hindered the progress. And I'll tell you two basic things that has brought sanity to those projects. The tariff, cost reflective tariff, is one. And the second one is, apart from the exchange rates now, let's look at the subsidy that was taken out. Before, if you installed a 5 kilowatt system, let's say it cost you 5 million naira, it would take you around 12 to 13 years to pay it back before the subsidy was taken out. But now, that same 5 million naira, 5 kilowatt system will take you around 3.5 years or even less to pay back when you look at the cost, when you look at the opportunity cost of the alternative, right? So this is what is actually going to drive the investments and the ability for these systems to be affordable. Now, those projects were there. They are big, bold, and beautiful. But when you start to implement them, you realize that you would only have to give them out as a grant. And to what extent can you give a grant? You all know that Africa gets a meager amount of the investment into the power business. And there's a reason why. Capital is smart. Capital will only go to where it can thrive and make money for its shareholders. So unless we create an environment where power business can thrive practically, and investment can, be recovered, which is where we are at right now. And if you see how things are moving very quickly, with a lot of small businesses going into solar, installing every day. Houses are adopting solar systems every day. The government is investing through REA. Universities have solar systems. Some hospitals have solar systems in them. These are all those national energizing programs that, in partnership with the World Bank and so on, that were a bit delayed before, but now they are moving much quicker. And it's interesting because of our delay, technology has also moved along. And there's also something we can celebrate a little bit. We don't have a lot of infrastructural footprint like many other continents. So in Africa, the moment we can get regulation right in a way that ensures that investment into power business can be recovered and that the end consumers are aware of their options and the available power sources that are around them and what they can do with it, right? It has to be, you have to look at it in two ways. One is the big monster of the grid, the big power pools and so on that requires massive power plants, huge investments in billions of dollars, right? And then the small end consumer in his house who just wants to turn on the light or just the freezer so she can sell her cold drinks, and so on and so forth. Those people also need solutions right now. That's where the decentralized small businesses providing last mile solutions would come in. So investors, VC firms and so on need to look at how they can support these small businesses, and provide them with the thought leadership they need to unlock decentralized power solutions from the grassroots, up, because we can't wait for the huge investments to deliver power to the last mile because the infrastructure still hasn't even.
Hello, Abdul-Majid. Okay, I think we just lost our connection with Abdul-Majid right there. But of course, we are looking at what the World Bank has said, and has to do with the need for the investments, massive investment, I must say, into Africa's energy space. And that can actually help to unlock job creation, reduce definitely unemployment, and boost the economy. So I'm told that Abdul-Majid is back. Thank you so much. So even as we conclude on this conversation, let's look at this. Let's look at the conversation from this angle. We have solar energy, we have wind energy, hydropower energy, geothermal energy that Abia State has invested massively in. That is biomass, biogas, wave energy, tidal wave, tidal energy, green hydrogen, waste to energy projects that the Lagos state government is also investing into. But then when you look at all these alternative energy systems, you discover that Africa is just focused on some certain aspects and not looking at the other areas, as I have mentioned. Is it that those areas whereby you can divest and gain optimal, benefits in terms of power production and distribution and even exportable energy to other continents? Is it that it's not lucrative? Or why is it that Africa is not looking at those other areas and just concentrating on a certain specific pools?
So I can assure you that Africa is looking at those certain areas. There are small businesses, there are young people every day trying to cluster energy demand. Because you see, these technologies that you have called, they require investment to deliver them. They require very clear EPC approaches to deliver them and clear investment plans on how to recover the investment that has gone into them. So we need to aggregate energy demand. That's why we've been promoting clusters and energy demand, aggregation, because that is where you're able to now say, I have this amount of energy demand and these people are all prepared to pay because this is the amount of productivity it will unlock for them. And this is the investment. If you provide them with, a solar, a mix of energy solution, they would be willing to pay for it. So this is the decentralized approach I was telling you about. We must, look at, power supply in the continent from 2 points of view. There is the big one, the grid that already exists, that is already mostly outdated, that needs huge investment and regulatory framework, national focus, continental focus, and all of that to deliver. And then there is the decentralized solutions that exist now because technology has advanced, where at state level, community level, cluster level, you can start coming together to provide, to deliver these power solutions to yourself. And this is where small companies, like Dear Nigeria comes in to see how to aggregate understand this consumption, and get the power to where it's needed the most, when it's needed the most, at a price that makes sense to the end consumer. So Africa is looking at the energy mix, but we have limitations around regulation, cost-reflective tariff, and the investment exchange rate framework and things like that, which are now improving. The clarity is there for investors to invest, and we're now looking at more green bonds because renewable energy investment requires patient capital. Patient capital is not everywhere. You need to build an enabling environment to make patient capital comfortable to come and take risks with you for a long time. And not a lot of local, funding sources are patient and large enough to meet, that demand. So that's why we always have to, be hearing things from World Bank and other international institutions that can, provide us with that, that cheap investment, that long-term investment that we can use to unlock one community at a time, to have energy access. And energy access is that one thing that can turn around your economic situation and your productivity, your living condition almost instantly, and your health condition as well, almost instantly.
Well, we hope that the $30 billion injection that the World Bank is hoping to make available for Africa will be able to remove the encumbrances and expedite the process of powering Africa. Thank you so much, Abdulmajid Amusa, CEO and founder, Dear Nigeria, for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.
Thank you so much. I think Nigeria is well positioned for that energy transition, and we're seeing it, all the way from the downstream, the renewable energy access. The REA is doing a lot of work. Thank you so much.
We're sharing your optimism. Thank you very much.